I'd like to say a few words about the purpose of this event, and then I'll move on swiftly to introduce our speakers. As an organization, Animal Alliance Asia stands against all forms of oppression. We recognize that various forms of systemic oppressions are underlined by problematic systems, beliefs, and processes. For example, assigning a higher worth for some individuals than others. That being said, the intention of today's talk is not to simply compare the experiences of different groups of oppressed individuals, which in today's case are non-human animals and transgender people. Oppressive systems may also be shaped by cultures and processes such as colonialism and belief systems such as white supremacy. With this in mind, as part of Animal Alliance Asia's cross-movement solidarity program, we wanted to start an important discussion today, taking a step in building allyship between the gender minority rights movement and the animal justice movement in Pakistan. We want to explore some of the common root causes between these oppressions and movements and try to generate some ideas on how we can dismantle these systems in solidarity with one another. Today, we're having such an important discussion between the gender minorities movement and the animal justice movement in Pakistan. And some of the questions we might explore today are, how can our movements stand in solidarity with each other and become allies? Can we dismantle mechanisms of oppression together and achieve liberation for all? And what does true inclusivity look like? Before I delve into these questions, it's my pleasure to introduce to you all our two wonderful speakers from Pakistan. So first of all, we have Ailya Khan, our country representative for Pakistan. Ailya graduated in architecture from MCA Lahore, Pakistan. She worked with grassroots organizations in the country for sexual minorities, art education, human rights, and non-human rights. Ailya has been providing shelter to non-human animals and creating awareness for non-human animals for 5 years as an activist. Next up, I'd like to introduce Khursand. Khursand Bayar Ali is a trans rights activist, community counselor, motivational speaker, writer, and director of Notanki Production. She's currently working as a project manager at Sati Foundation Pakistan for gender-based violence on gender minorities. Khursand was formerly associated with UN subsidiaries working on policy development for the transgender community in the subcontinent and served as an honorary chairing committee member for the key populations in Global Fund. She has also worked in Pakistan's national HIV/AIDS control program. So thank you both of you, Ailya and Khursand. Now, before we begin the discussion, I'd like to invite you to join us in a 2-minute silence led by Ailya. Ailya, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Angel, for your wonderful introduction. Before we start, we would like you to join us in taking a minute to remember why we're all here. Please find a comfortable position and close your eyes if you feel like it. Let's take a minute to remember the victims of oppression all over the world. Today, we remember those who are born into captivity and cruelty. We remember those who are oppressed under speciesism. We remember those who share this planet with us. We are here in solidarity for those who want to live in freedom. We are here in solidarity with those whose voices are ignored even when they resist. We come together for a better world for all. May peace prevail and oppression perish. You may open your eyes, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ailya. So, okay, I think we are ready for our discussion today. First, I'd like to invite Khursand and Ailya to give us a little bit of background or context by starting with the question, what do you think minorities are? Could you give us or tell us what you think minorities are?
Khursand, I would want Khursand to start with what she can define minorities as.
Angel, for asking me this question. It's a very common question, especially in a country where we live in, I mean, in third world countries, there are certain sort of minorities. There are religious minorities, there are sexual minorities, then there are political minorities, leftist parties, and, other movements, those who are not in the mainstream and stuff like that. So any community or any bunch of people who is maybe smaller than the bigger bunch of people is called minority. And also, when we go into the deeper definition of the minority, minority is the one who actually make their presence felt by their voice and by their actions or by their maybe deeds. So to me, that's what minority is. So here in Pakistan, I mean, uh, I've crossed 30 now. So I've realized that, um, you become a minority you very easily become a minority. I mean, like I was born in a Shia family. I was a religious minority from the beginning. I grew up and I realized that I'm a trans woman. That made me a sexual or a gender minority. And then I'm a leftist, I'm a feminist, which makes me already a political minority as well. So yeah, that's how I guess that's how we define minority.
I totally second Khursand on this. If you look at the sociological definition, according to sociology, it's a group of people who, because of their physical or cultural characteristics, are singled out from the others in society, in which they live for differential or unequal treatment, and they are subjected to unequal and different treatment, and who therefore regard themselves as objects of collective discrimination. I also think that just like Khorsand explained, it's not about numbers. You might be in many numbers, but your ideology might make you a minority. You might be globally, you might be a majority, but otherwise, you might be a minority. I would give an example maybe of cows, for example. If you look at number of cows in the country, they might outnumber humans, but if we look at their state of oppression, they and discrimination, so they are a minority. uh, that's my belief and opinion on this. Thank you, Angel.
Thank you, Arsana Ilya, for your introduction and providing some examples, and also encouraging us to look at the word minority or like the concept from different perspectives. Um, I think to give some structure to our discussion today, we're going to talk about a few different topics. So first of all, learning from Pakistan's gender minority struggle, and then we'll move on to explore some of the common root causes between the gender minorities and animal justice movements. And then we'll talk about violence and oppression. So let's start with our first topic. So what would you say are some of the lessons that you've observed that we can maybe learn from the gender minority struggle in your country?
So, okay, as far as I've understood the question is about the struggle of Pakistani minority and activism, and that's what you're asking, right? Okay, so as I've stated earlier, and as I've mentioned earlier, that Pakistan is a Muslim state. We aren't a very strict Muslim state, but still we have our own norms, and we have our own parameters, and we have our protocols to follow and stuff like that. And at times we aren't really strict about our religion and religious beliefs and stuff. But at times when we feel like that we have to be strict in these things, we get very stubborn and strict about those things. Now, sexuality is a topic which is not widely discussed in the country. I mean, especially in the households. I mean, in our lounges, our parents do not discuss sex with us. I mean, even if a girl is growing up or a boy is growing up, you have issues, you have queries, and you have problems. I'm like, you have puberty, you have questions about them. Um, we don't discuss these things in our family. Now it has started happening in educated families when there are, the generation gap is getting finished, and there is more internet and, more Google around the world. And, people are also, and there are so many channels, so many programs about parenting and stuff like that. So in the last 10 to 20 years, the parenting style has changed as well. But if we see before 20 or 30 years, the parenting style was totally different. Now people have started talking about these things, but this generation which I'm talking about, the one which grew in last like 10 to 15 years, they started taking help from Google. Then we have pornography, then we have so many things on Google. You can't really filter what is the right information for you. So I believe that sex education from the beginning is very important for kids who are in primary, who are in secondary level of education, because they need to know that where are they going, how are they growing, and what are they thinking, what sensuality. And there are so many sexual questions in a kid's mind that needs to be addressed. One thing. The second thing, about our activism is that we basically work on the social justice and legal justice, and we particularly work for the trans community. I hear cases like rape and murder and harassment every day, and at times I realize that those rape cases are they're of same age, right? They are from the same socio-economic background. The point is that the society is suppressed, right? They, both of them, both male and female, do not have options to express themselves. They don't have outlets to talk about sexuality, about sex, about sexual life, about their sensuality. So the suppression of a society, it makes us, it makes society a monster. When there is suppression, when there is when there is open discussions about sex and sexuality and sex education, people would talk about their sexual needs, their requirements, their problems, their queries. Things would get clear in their mind. They won't, like, they won't have any um suspense or excitement about anything in their mind. So in a country like us, in a country like Pakistan, I guess we need to also you know uh, we should be rather taking the rape cases as case studies. We should not be only giving them the trial and sending them to prisons or something like that. Sending the rape victims or the rapist, sending a rapist to a prison won't help, I believe. Sending a rapist to a mental asylum and studying him and asking him that what is he going through, or what problems has he gone through in his childhood or her childhood, would make things clear, I guess. So I guess as far as the activism is concerned, our activism is the overall, the shape of activism in our country is going good. It's on a good pace. But still, I guess we need to work on so many things. There are little details that we need to work on. We need to work on education, first of all. Advocacy must be done on a massive level, because in a country like Pakistan, people have stopped watching TV. Television was a very strong medium till 2000, I guess, one or two. Now people don't watch television. Everybody has smartphone, they have gadgets, they have internet. So it's very easy for us to spread our message through internet, through WhatsApp, through Facebook, through Twitter, or something like that. So I believe that we should start using technology in spreading the message as well. And also we should involve as many people as we can. and we should also involve the government sector in our development sector as well, because what we miss and mostly is that the development sector works on its own. So there's a difference between the development sector, government sector, and public sector. So it has to be a synchronization between all these sectors, so the message can be um, addressed and conveyed in a very strong manner. So yeah, Alia, would you like to add something into it?
Yes, there's definitely a lot to learn from you, and I can see that there is so much that I would want to replicate in my activism as well. And I totally agree with the point where when you speak about education and open conversations, we don't have those, not for sexuality, not for gender minority, not for animal rights.
Exactly.
The main issue is that in our maybe colonized part of the world, I would call it, South Asia specifically, we have been conditioned not to question anyone's, not to question any rules, any hierarchy, and
Exactly.
that in itself becomes a problem, because when you can't question, you can't educate, you're not open for dialogue. And I would totally agree that changing and parenting styles are coming up, and we see that happening. And there is definitely a lot of awareness to begin with. There is a lot of because animal rights in Pakistan are literally at its conception stages right now. The country is not even open for a dialogue over it. The efforts that we see from on-ground activists is an example of that. So education, and then we see awareness, raising awareness through healthy dialogues, through patience. And I really appreciate you mentioning social media, because I think what has changed in the past 10 years is the social media has given visibility to allyships, to gender minority allyships, to our movements all together. So there needs to be some effort maybe made into this, and so we make more effort into creating awareness through digital platforms, so it becomes easier for us to open that dialogue maybe in a digital space now. And you mentioned the justice system. The justice system, of course, for animal rights, there are some things that have started. There is a wildlife case going on right now in court. It's being carried out by another on-ground rescue workers. They are starting to sign petitions and all of these, but I totally agree, it's a long process of involving government, public, media, development sectors, and it's a complete synergy altogether. um, yeah, so but I have a question for you, Khursan. Do you think that there any success in your movement so far in the gender, um, are there any points that you want to highlight? Sorry, I'll rephrase that. Any points that you want to highlight that have been successful because of the synergy that you spoke of?
Yeah, there has been success and there has been victories. Especially in 2018, we were able to get the Transgender Protection Act passed as a law. That was quite a big thing for us, because that's one of the most progressive legislation in the country, and also in South Asian countries as well. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, it's one of the progressive legislation in amongst the Muslim countries. Now, most of the countries do not have their Transgender Protection Act. We do have an act which is very detailed. It talks about gender expression. It talks about freedom of expression. It talks about your gender identity. the way you want to express or depict your gender. But recently, a problem has occurred that the Shariti Council, there's a Islamic Ideology Council that has filed a petition in the Parliament against that particular Transgender Protection Act 2018. And now they have actually filed a petition against that law, and they say that this law is actually a hidden agenda for LGBTIQ people, and it talks about other sexual minority. It does talk about other sexual minorities, but it mostly talks about transgender people, Khwaja Sara people, culturally accept, because Khwaja Sara and transgender people in Pakistan are culturally acceptable because they've had a history of what you call that they've had a history of acceptance because they've been working in courts from the Mughal era, and still, so things are going on. But I would say that Transgender Protection Act 2018 was a victory for all of us in Pakistan. Secondly, if you look around in Pakistan, mostly in the metropolitan cities, we have so many NGOs working for trans community and for LGBTIQ community in Pakistan. Like, there's my organization, Sati Foundation, then there's KSS, there is one in Pindi, two in Multan, three, four, six in Karachi. There are organizations working in Quetta, there are organizations working in smaller towns. So these organizations, the the impact of these organizations is that community is getting closer. We are getting to now we are able to know the problems of the community. Like initially we wouldn't have any idea that what's happening in Multan or what's happening in Okada or what's happening in Sahiwal. Through this organization and through this networking, now we have an idea that who is doing what, and where is this illegality is happening, where is this injustice happening. We can reach out the police station, we can reach out the exact judiciary and the legal system over there, and we can talk to other people, so we can make linkages. So that's the good thing. I guess that's quite a milestone. So I believe that we are going in a right direction. There are loopholes, there are some drawbacks as well, like any other community. We have some drawbacks and loopholes as well, but then again, I think it happens in any community. And when you're new, because we started working on these things in the last decade, like it's been like 10 years now, so it's not really a very mature movement in Pakistan. So if we look at the movement and if we look at the tenure of the movement, it's not really mature. It's just started off like 10, 11, 12 years back, maybe mostly. So even after 12 years or 10 years, it's going in a good pace. And I'm very hopeful for the coming years as well.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Khursand. I totally am glad to know that there have been some like the act that was passed for gender minorities, and it is really hurting because I have personally been involved, not at a scale like yours, but on a smaller scale with the trans community and the gender minorities in Pakistan. And it hurts every time when there are roadblocks that are so unnecessarily created to or call it or be things that are being called hidden agendas, for example. I think we can connect this very easily to the same point that you brought up initially, that everything is so strict and everything is not to be questioned, that anyone who tries to break the system is seen from a perspective of with a person with an agenda rather than a person who might be talking on terms of humanity or trying to bring a positive change in the community. Thank you. That's from me. Angel, thank you.
Thank you both for sharing your wonderful insights. And I'm very happy to see that I think we already can see some parallels between the gender minorities rights and the animal justice movement in your country. And I also think that it's a lot of talking on our side. So I'd like to invite everyone, all participants, if you can share any of your thoughts, comments, or even questions in the chat box. You can feel free to do so, and we can answer any questions or respond to any thoughts you might have. If you don't have any, we'll still have a Q&A at the end. So you can do that throughout this talk as well. Okay, again, okay, I see a comment from Kaho, actually a question. So Kaho asks, what are some advantages or disadvantages with the Islamic ideology in each of your movements? So Ailya or Khursand, feel free to share your thoughts. Ailya, yes.
Yeah. So I thank
Okay.
you, Kaho. It's a very interesting question that you've asked. This is my personal opinion, of course. It's coming from my experience. I think the advantage of Islamic ideology, if I look at religion as an ideology, as theory, I think it has covered being kind to animals. It has covered being kind to human beings. Um, but if we look at the implementation of the ideology, there are a lot of um, problems in the implementation of it. I'm sorry, I think she has rephrased her question, which is how can an Islamic ideology help or hinder the progress of your movement? So if I look at Islam, because I'm a Muslim and I do believe in God, and I think that there is an advantage. It can help us if we get people to help people understand what the ideology is about. Now, because we are a developing nation, and we again, like we mentioned earlier, there has been hardly no work in regard to educating people or civic sense or empathy for the general masses. The region has been under war for so long. We see that there has been no work done, even under Islamic ideology, to bring to start the topic of animal rights. At least that is what I have seen so far. And it can help us if people start to be educated from the angle of religion, and it at the same time it can also hinder the movement when people who are in majority don't agree with a certain ideology. And Khorsand, if you would like to take the lead on the question, that's my opinion,
Yeah,
at least.
why not? Sure. Okay, that's a very good question. And that's a very tricky question as well. And I guess I would agree with Alia, what she said. I mean, I totally agree with her. I'd just like to add one thing. There are two things in a religion. One is interpretation and one is belief, right? Now, Islam is a very progressive, very peaceful sort of a religion, but the interpretation and implementation of this religion in our country is different. Now it varies from country to country. It's different in Iran, it's different in Saudi, it's different in maybe Lebanon, it's different in Turkey, it's different in Malaysia, and it's different in Pakistan. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, I've stated this earlier, that we are not a very strict conservative Muslim community like Saudi or Iran or like any other strict Arab country. We are very neutral sort of a Muslim society. But then again, there are things that we are we are I'm not getting the right word. There are things which we are very concerned about. We are very touchy about a few things, and they could be anything. Like, let's suppose blasphemy in for instance, in our country, in last sep I'm sorry, in 7 to 8 years, we've had massive blasphemy cases, and none of them were actually they weren't really the true cases. They have been to courts, they have been to trials, but none of them were uh, was a real blasphemy case when there's a fight and somebody has actually abused our prophet, or maybe somebody else or something like that. So our country is, as Alia mentioned as well, we've been into civil wars. We've been under the dictatorships, we've been under our borders became open with Afghanistan. So no, we have received so many unwanted, extremism from other countries. Like we have received, unwanted extremism from Saudi. We never wanted it, but we have received it thanks to our governments, thanks to our dictatorship. We've received extremism from Talibanization from Afghanistan because of the open border policies. So there are impacts on, maybe now the change is coming. I can see the change because in last 20 years the society was a really conservative society, a Pakistani, because before that Pakistani society was a very progressive Muslim neutral society, which was not really concerned about short skirts or sleeveless or low necks or anything. They were only concerned about logical issues. But now these things are our issues. Wearing a sleeveless in public is our issue, which is getting finished gradually, because it came gradually. Now it's going off gradually as well. And thank God the democracy has taken over now the country. And I guess as far as the democracy stays and the stability in the country stays, I guess these things would stay for a longer time as well. But coming back to your question, in current situation, I believe that Islamic ideology does not support any kind of idea which includes sexuality or gender expression. So this, your question is that this it does not support our ideology. Islamic ideological council or Islamic ideology does not support gender expression in the country or sexual freedom in the country. I also mentioned in the beginning that we can't even talk about sexuality openly in our families. There are still families. I mean, in my family, you can't discuss sexuality. You can't discuss um, your gender expression, your puberty, your problems. You can't discuss that in a lounge meeting. So that's the problem. So let's hope for the best. Maybe in the future we can overcome this issue as well.
And Ilya, for sharing your insights regarding the Islamic ideology. And we have, I'll just read out a comment from Fajar Sakri. It's
Yeah.
so interesting that what Khursand is saying is exactly what's been happening in Indonesia as well for the past 20 years. It's interesting we have similarity within the region.
And do you see the connection? That's because of the colonial connection that we have. I guess Indonesia has been under the Indonesia was a French colony, if I'm not wrong, or a British colony, but it was a colony. So we are under the same colonial laws that we are still following. Um, we have our own constitution, Dutch colony. Exactly. Thank you so much. Yeah, exactly. For 350 years. So after Pakistan was being made, we had a first constitution after 15 or 20 years. That was 1973. Before that, we had a constitution which was not a constitution, but it was a copy of the colonial law, which was being followed already in the country, in the Indo-Pak. Then they actually little bit twisted it, and they started following it. Then in 73, we came into being in 1947, and our first constitution came in 1973. So, there's a difference, priorities are different. Na? We making a constitution and making it a proper country was not our priority. We waited for like 20 years, aram se, okay, let someone come and he will make the constitution, and we kept following the older constitution, and still it's happening. We have three constitutions. We have Sharia law, which is Islamic law, which was made in Zia regime. That was the darkest regime of the country. That was a dictatorship. And then we have the constitution, um, the federal constitution, and then we have this there's other one, uh, yeah, and then there is one which is the colonial copy of the constitution and stuff like that. They all three of them are almost same. They're different from points to points, and they vary from one point to another. But it's a big mess. And thanks to the Britishers, that they have actually ruined us. We were a very progressive and very nice society, and they've actually ruined us. They stole everything out of us, and they left. Okay.
I'm sorry. I don't think I should be laughing or smiling at all. I'm sorry about what happened in your country.
No, but that's okay. It's something that I laugh myself. I'm like, seriously, who gives his country to somebody who's a Gora, who's coming from, from from another country? He talks another language, and they ask you for the trade, and then they take over your country and stuff like that. It's funny though, it is. But they were tricky. We weren't at that time.
Right. Thank you, Khursand, for lighting up this discussion. I definitely like that. And thank you both for shedding light on this question. Thank you, Taho and Fajar, for sharing your questions and thoughts in the chat box. Again, everyone, feel free to share anything. Well, according to our safe space guidelines, share your questions or thoughts in the chat box. And I think we'll now zoom up a little bit and see if we can find any common root causes between the gender minorities struggle and struggle for non-human animals. So Khursand or Ailya, any of you, would you like to share some of your thoughts on that question with us?
Please. If I were to talk of common ground between the movements, because I've had some experience with gender minorities, some with animal rights, but of course, starting with animal rights, it's fresh to animal rights in a lot of ways. What I've observed is that there is there is a structural problem, and the problem from society comes in is when we speak of hierarchy of moral worth. If I have to put it to place in my local term, when we call ourselves the Ashraful Makhlukat, I've mentioned this in our previous talk as well, or when we call ourselves the superior being, um, the I believe that oppression starts to stem from that, because once we think that I am at a higher moral ground than the other person, I am going to oppress the other person or species or being, and then it will only grow towards a narcissistic ideology rather than a helping, kind society. So this is my take, and I would want Khursand to comment on this as well, please.
I think when in any society which has class system and classism and gradism in itself, that won't succeed, that won't run in a longer race. Because classism and racism, that actually kills you, that actually makes a society um, dull. Now what happens over here in our country is that the richer gets richest day by day, and the poorer, the one who is poor is getting poorer day by day. And that is because the unequal what you call this unequal resources of wealth, of human resources, of health, of education, of jobs, and of money as well. So there has to be the society has to be a neutral. We can't make it an ideal society, right? But we can make it at least neutral society, which works for the rich people as well, and for the people who are not very rich, which works for the educated class as well, and for the class which is not very educated, which works for the young people and for the old people as well. So there has to be a harmony and balance in the society. I guess that's the only way that we can achieve our goals. And um, that's it, I guess, because there are so many things that I can talk about, but then again, until unless there is no balance or no harmony or no neutral, there is no neutralism in the society won't proceed. The society won't go further. You know, if there is no harmony, then there is no society. Then there is a bunch of people, there's a crowd of people who's living together, but that's not a society. There's a very famous thinker of Pakistan. You guys may search him as well. He's a very conflicted personality as well. Hassan Nisar Alia, you might know him. Um, I don't really follow him all the time, but there are few things which he says, and that really hit me at times, because he says that we are not a society, we are a bunch of people that we are living together. So there's a difference between being a society or being a bunch of people or a crowd of people. Um, so yeah, we should be rather focusing on being a society and being a neutral society, because we can't be an ideal society, we can't be an ideal uh, uh, social structure, but we can be a neutral social structure at least. That's what we should aim for.
Thank you both for explaining some of the similarities or common causes between the gender minority struggle and the struggle for non-human animals. And Khursand, you mentioned about some of the unequal treatments amongst different groups of humans, for example, of the resources they receive. And I think that's a great example. And I also think that it's a perfect segue into our next topic, which is, I guess, another expression of this hierarchy of moral worth that Ailya mentioned, which is violence and oppression. Violence is another, how do you put it? Another way we see how like different groups are assigned different moral worth. So I wonder if both of you can tell us a little bit more about how those are manifested in the different oppressed groups, whether it's the trans community or non-human animals. What sort of violences or like oppressions do they experience specifically?
I'm actually reading the question, but I'm stuck somewhere actually. So we have George with us, and he says that what success or challenges have you experienced in gaining allies from privileged majority groups? Okay. Um, can I answer this first, and then I'll come to the other question? I guess that was quite a success. If we talk about on a larger scale or on a bigger level, that was quite a success. Now we are in collaboration with Aurat March, which is a feminist movement, which is, I would say, it's not a minority movement, but then again, it's in a country like Pakistan, it is considered as a minority. But for us, for our community, it's quite a big achievement that we're in collaboration with them. We're in collaboration with the student movements in the country. We're in collaboration with the political. There are few political movements with that we are in collaboration with. Then we are in collaboration with the majority of reading circles of there are progressive universities like LUMS and BNU that we those who are allies. Then there are union councils like FEMSO, uh, Tahaffuz movement, Hakuk Khalq movement. There are other movements as well that we have become allies with. So I believe in last 5 to 6 years, it's quite a big achievement that we have um, been in relationship and in collaboration with these big because they are minorities, as they are not really majority in the country. They are not really a very big platform in the country, but then again, they have their own standing and they can talk about their rights because they don't talk about LGBTIQ. So getting attached with us is quite a thing. And things are getting as I've told earlier, that things are getting okay. It's Kamobesh. Elia, can you please translate this in English? Uh,
Somewhat,
कमोबेश इंडिया से
somewhat.
मिलता जुलता ही है हमारा। मतलब इंडिया की थोड़ी सी सिचुएशन मेरा ख्याल है 1% या 2% शायद हमसे बेहतर होगी, बिकॉज वहां पे रिलीजन का इतना ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। बट इन पाकिस्तान हमारे यहाँ थोड़ा सा रिलीजन का भी प्रॉब्लम है, तो थोड़ा सा हम लोग एक दो स्टेप्स पीछे हैं। बट देन अगेन इंडिया से मिलता जुलता है इफ वी टॉक अबाउट द करंट सिचुएशन। तो या
Just to translate, it's basically it's pretty similar to the Indian situation. We might be a few steps behind or a step forward, but eventually it's quite similar across the border. Thank you. I think Angel, can you?
So I wanted to question I wanted to address George, but I guess that we did address Asta as well. Asta, did we address your question as well?
Thank you, Khursand. I think partly, and I think we also have some time left for Q&A at the end of today's discussion. So why don't shall we save this till the end so that we can move on to our discussions, because I want to make sure that everyone can hear from you about our final topic, if that's okay. But thank you, George, for your question, and Ilya and Khursand for answering. So for the sake of time, I think we'll move on to the final topic, which is violence and oppression that I was talking about earlier. Would you be able to shed some light on some of the examples of how the different oppressed groups experience violence or oppression in your country? Ilya or Khursand?
Yeah. I would really think that this is pretty interesting because right what George exactly questioned and how we answered it is linking right into this question. If we talk about violence and oppression and how we are working against it. So, first, we need to identify what types of oppressions there are happening around us. We have, so the most common one is the systemic oppression that we are all fighting against, be it the women's movement, for children's movement, for animal rights movement, for the leftists. I think the major issue is systemic. And then we see how movements around us are gaining momentum and they're losing momentum. So we see that happening again and again because somehow, if I have to give you a visual, so as soon as we start going up, there is the systemic oppression that brings us down, and then we start to make our way around it, and then we try to fight it, and we try to put in our struggle and bring in the momentum up again. Now, that momentum is achieved through different strategies. And if one of them is allyship, when we understand that if we are in fewer in number, we need more allies, we need more people who we can stand with and fight against oppression. um, if I'm right, if I've answered you correctly, Angel, and if Khursand would like to shed some light on this, please.
Um, I guess, Ailya, you're right. You've answered it quite right, I guess. Oppression. Um, I'm thinking that you can't really explain oppression because, at times oppression varies as well. Because,
Okay. So oppression is, I guess, it varies from person to person. It varies from culture to culture. It varies from, you know, it varies from social structure to another social structure as well, as guys. Because to me, um, maybe uh, to me, living in a room and not being able to go out is oppression, right? And for a woman who's living in a village and she is not allowed to go out, she's living in a home, she's not allowed to go home, but that's not the oppression for her. Maybe there are other forms of oppression which she would think that this is oppression, but then again, the universal phenomena would not change, that would remain same. If you are if you are not giving somebody his or her rights, that's oppression. If you're not giving somebody space to talk or to express his or herself, that's oppression. If you're not letting somebody explain him or herself, that's oppression. So yeah, that's oppression for me. But in our country, people or communities or societies, they aren't really aware of what oppression is, because we have been immune to it so much from years and from decades and from centuries, that now at times we forget that what our rights are and what oppression is. So there's a huge demand in spreading this message that what oppression is, that has to be spread massively as well, that this message has to be spread massively as well, because that's what we do through our work, when we talk about legal justice, when we talk about harassment, and when we tell people that what's harassment, what oppression, these are your rights, you're not being given your rights, that's bad. So most of the people aren't really aware that what their rights are, what oppression is. So yeah, that's a problem. So yeah, that's it, I guess.
Great, thank you both of you again for sharing your thoughts. I think it's time for us to have a little breakout session. So first of all, we will break into, I think, 2 breakout rooms where we'll have 10 minutes to discuss a few questions. Our tech team is going to paste them in the chat and I will read them aloud here. So the first question is, what makes a minority, in your opinion? Is it the numbers or is it other reasons? The second question is, what's your opinion about cross-movement solidarity, or like forming alliances between movements? Third question is, what is oppression to you? How does it look like to you? Or how does it feel, maybe? And finally, how can we gain momentum for our separate causes?
And the first question, like Ailya and Khursand was discussing in earlier, it's not about numbers. We have different kinds of like minorities and different processes of people being a minority. So Khursand explained like how there are like a religious minority and political and a social minority. And I think that also kind of tells us how we're not kind of like born a minority, but it's in a particular, like a social setting or particular social context, we are being minoritized. So I recently like using the term minoritized over minority because it's a process of being a minority. So yeah, that was my thoughts on the first question. On the second question, what is my opinion about cross-movement solidarity? I think it's really, really important now that we are more conscious about how different systems of oppressions are interconnected. So in this discussion in particular, we talked about how the how the kind of like majority of I guess like more privileged systems and colonialism kind of created a particular, I guess like hierarchy of people. So like you know, cisgender over transgender and humans over non-human animals. So like if we kind of like realize that those systems of oppressions are interconnected, I think we can build a stronger solidarity across movements. And I feel like it's so important to realize what other groups of oppressed individuals are going through. From, you know, I'm more towards animal rights kind of movements, but then understanding what racial minority or sexual minority groups of people are going through is really important to me, because we can still be an oppressor even if we are in our activism. So in order to just, you know, dismantle the systems of oppression altogether, we have to be paying attention to other forms of oppression, other minoritized groups of people are going through as well. What is oppression to you? I think Hassan's comment was really, really useful. Like we can't really define oppression. It's like, it's so different to other people. And, you know, it's also different in different parts of the world or different places as well, or social context. So, but I think when you are not able to express yourself freely, or when you're not exercise your rights, then that's an oppression, I think, in the simplest term. And the fourth question, how can we gain momentum for our causes? I think just connecting to the second question, I think it's so important to build a stronger solidarity across movements, and just like finding common grounds to fight against the dominant systems of ideology or dominant systems of oppression. Yeah, that's all I can say right now on top of my head. So yeah, if anyone else wants to answer.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Cajo. And then thank you as well, Asta. I saw that you left some comments in the chat box for your group. So to answer the first question about what is minority, no, it's not the numbers. There are several minority groups in India as well, but they are termed so not because of the numbers. It's actually due to a lack of representation. In answering the second question, which is your opinion about cross-movement solidarity, your answer from your group is cross-movement solidarity is very much needed. I personally was introduced to it and learned a lot about animal rights and gender rights from activists working in these areas. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, Asta. And thank you everyone for your participation in the breakout session. And finally, I think it's time for us to move on to the final part of the event, which is Q&A. So if you have any questions for our speakers, this is your final chance. Please type them in the chat box for Khursand and Ailya. So right now, I think we can answer Ailya's question from before. So her question is, excuse me, Aspa's question. So her question is, Ailya talked about the concept of higher moral worth, and Khursand mentioned the system of hierarchy in societies, which you have something similar in India. So in light of these, how can cisgender people work on becoming better allies for both movements? So do you have anything to say to that, Ailya or Khursand?
What of my observation for from my time in the movement has been that first is the cisgender friends or allies need to understand that they need to create a positive space for dialogue. And until and unless they can create a positive space for dialogue, we cannot create allyship and bonds. It can also start with, of course, because we are conditioned into a system where if there are a lot of, we take over each other's space in conversations, in spaces. So it's very important to create a safe space by the allies for us, for all minority groups, if they, and that is one way to go about it. That's my observation that I'm sharing. If Khursand or anyone else would like to take a lead on this further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ailya, for answering. Khursand, do you have anything to add to this? Thank you, Kaho, for your question. So Kaho asked, in your view, what does true liberation look like for transgender people and non-human animals?
I think it's a beautiful, beautiful question. In my view, I think total liberation, of course, it's a very far-fetched idea, and it is going to take us a lot of struggle and hard work. So true liberation, in my opinion, would be stemming from empathy. In a world where we would have empathy, we would have respect, we would have understanding, and we would have the space to actually let other people exist and we coexist with others. So that would be my vision of how I view it. But of course, to reach that goal, there are a lot of struggles that we have to go stepwise and we have to overcome in order to achieve those. So true liberation is such a beautiful idea, and I wish that we could achieve it as soon as possible. And I'm sure with all our efforts, we someday will. Thank you, Kaho, and thank you, Angel.
Thank you for answering, Ailya, and I do hope that we will reach that very soon. And I think we have another question. This is from George. So George asks, in Pakistan, does asking for solidarity with non-human animal causes risk negative responses such as don't compare us to animals or let's focus on humans first? And if so, do you have thoughts on getting over such barriers?
Yes, actually, I just yesterday faced something like that. So I'll give you an example. I commented under someone's post about how they were, talking about going plant-based to save the world. And right below it, there was a comment directed towards that person saying that, are you even Muslim? So it's just if we have to look at it that way, we face that a lot because the first hurdle that people throw at you is of course religion, because they want you to just stop the debate there and then. So if you talk about animal liberation, they will hinder your dialogue or stop your dialogue with saying things like, are you even religious? Do you even believe in this? The second would be that why are you working for such causes when humans are dying and when children are dying? But I always answer them with this thing. I just tell them one thing, that humans, eventually, we can still stand up for each other. We still talk, we still express our pain. We still can make a video and put it on YouTube if we have to, get our word out. But how many animals can express themselves? So I believe that we need to put in more effort for animal liberation, because they cannot use the same tools to express themselves that we do. Of course, they do have an expression, but they don't have the same tools as us as humans. So that is my take on the comments that I usually get. I hope I've answered you, George.
Thank you, Ailya. I think that's a wonderful answer. If we do not have any more questions, then I think it's time for us to wrap up today. First of all, thank you so much for our guests, Ailya and Khursand, for being here. Thank you for everyone, attendees, for joining this discussion. Thank you, Khursand and Ailya, for your insightful sharing, and everyone for engaging. We hope you enjoyed hearing about the two movements from our guest speakers today, and that this discussion has given you a better understanding of some of the root causes of different oppressive systems and potentially how we can stand in solidarity with other movements as allies.